Welcome to Doctors at Work. My name's Matt Daniel, and this podcast is part of my mission to help doctors create successful and meaningful careers. Today's topic is retirement. Now, what kind of a life do you want after you retire? What sort of stories do you want to tell in your old age? What do you want your 90-year-old self to tell you today? Most of us will go through the retirement transition, and that involves a psychological adjustment as well as a change in identity. In this episode, Denise Taylor tells me that the key to good retirement is spending time thinking about what it is that you want and to plan ahead to help you thrive in retirement. Welcome, Denise. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Hi, well, thanks for asking. I'm Denise Taylor. I gained my doctorate at age 64, and throughout my career, I've always had an interest in older people and particularly the transition between work and retirement. And now at 66, it's the area that I pretty much focus on and helping people to think about what is life like after full-time work, which was my doctoral subject.
So, and that's our topic for us today is about
Yeah.
retirement, how to plan for your retirement and how to retire well. And I wonder, maybe you could tell me a bit about your doctoral research. What did you do and what did you find? Let's start there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I could just take a step back, because I'd always wanted to do PhD level research. And if I'd done it in my 40s, it would have been, what's going to be the best thing for my career? Let's focus on what's the minimum I can get away with? Because I've got an MSc in occupational psychology, I've got an MBA, and I always did the minimum, managing my time well. But this time, particularly doing the research during, the Corona episode, I got a lot of time. I mean, there was still all the uncertainty that we had going around. And my topic was chosen about something that was relevant to me rather than to a younger audience. And, you're not as old as me yet, but hopefully you will be one day. So the research is aimed at anybody thinking around retirement. And people generally are starting to think about that in their 50s. So, you know how PhD titles are really long. And it was, how do people find meaning in life after full-time work, and what are the psychological factors that help, which is a mouthful. But I was going into it from a psychologist's point of view rather than sociologist or any other perspective.
So I'm interested in the psychology then of retirement. So I'm 50, and actually just before I had a meeting with you, I had a conversation with somebody, and we were talking about what my retirement might look like.
Yeah.
I'm not planning to retire just yet, but sort of, but the topic did come up as what does my future hold, and I'm 50. So I would imagine that there'll be lots of 50-year-olds out there that probably will think that, and particularly in healthcare. Healthcare is challenging, and as you get older, the people who work nights or long hours, sort of that it does get trickier, I think. Sort of, certainly if I think in terms of the long hours and the night work, that gets more difficult as you get older. So people are going to sort of start thinking about, okay, what does retirement hold, and what's the kind of psychology of planning and transitioning. One day you're a doctor, sort of, you're a consultant or a GP at the top of your profession, and then retire, and bang, the next day all of that's gone.
And then the big thing about who am I without my job? Because you meet somebody and what do they say and what do you do? And everybody links in around your work. And particularly if you're, one of these people and your job is a lot to you, because some of the people I work with, they don't have any hobbies, they might do things with the children or grandchildren and do some healthy, go running or something, but they don't actually have any other interests. And so one of the problems is, so they don't know what to do, so they just carry on working. And I think one of the things that I'm aiming for with people is just to get them to pause and think, you know what, yeah, I can carry on doing this job till I'm 70 or 75, but should I? Because I think that, as we get older, we begin to have possibly some health challenges, or the people that we love die, and, we don't know where the future's going to go. You really don't. I see sort of 55, 60 to about 75-ish as these golden years. This is where I'm at.
Yeah.
And it's like, this should be your best life, because particularly I think of our age group, we've generally got okay with financial situations. So it's not like we're just having to manage on the state benefits. And it's like, so what is it that you want to do? And only carry on doing the work that you've done because you've made the conscious choice, not because you can't think of anything else. So it could be hobbies, you know, it could be voluntary work, or it can be the whole, I'm going to rethink my career and do something completely different. But maybe stop working the 60-hour weeks and actually have a bit more time to, you know, the stand back and smell the roses sort of thing.
Yeah, so I think that the idea of just carrying on working, that's interesting for me, because I've certainly, if I think of the people that are ahead of me, I've seen some people that have said, "That's it, I'm retiring," and they've disappeared, like
Yeah.
literally disappeared, and sort of, and we haven't seen them. Then there's other people that have retired, but they're still there. They're very much involved. They're continuing to work, although maybe not at the same intensity. And then I kind of think there's also a third group of people that I've seen is where people retired and stopped doing stuff, but they kind of were peripherally involved, and then gradually over 5 years or so, that peripheral involvement gradually sort of dissipates and disappears. I mean, how does one know what's right for you?
What I like to do is to get people to vision their future. And when I used to work for a large company, we used to do scenario planning, to see the different options, what are they likely to go, what's the best that could happen, and what if the worst happens, so that you're properly strategically thinking through decisions. So, it's obviously people are different, and everybody's going to want to do it this way. But one thing is to sort of take yourself off somewhere, away from social media, away from your phone and everything. For me, it's always going into woods and spending time in nature. But just close your eyes and think, what will my life be like if I just carry on until I can't carry on anymore? And generally, when I get people to think that, it's like, not quite so sure about that one. Then it's like, okay, well, what if I drop to 3 days a week and then 2 days a week? And they're quite happy with that. Interestingly, the people that have got the most money seem to want more and more money. And you think, but they will often share what their financial position is. But to most of us, it's like, but that is way more than anybody will need. But they've got this strong connection about fear of losing money or whatever. So they'll carry on working and keep on adding and adding and adding. And I can think of several people that I've worked with, and their partner dies or their partner gets a life-changing illness. And they, not like me, I started traveling at 49 and a half. So I spent 17 years doing like big adventurous holidays. But I'm going to wait and I'm going to wait and I'm going to do it when I retire. I'm not going to do anything till I'm 67. And then I'm going to do push back in Europe. Then the partner, and it's generally the man, alas, is not able to do it. So either they're then doing it on their own, which they don't want to do, or the whole world just sort of narrows in and they lose their confidence, and they hadn't considered how that might be. My partner thinks I'm terribly negative when I try and get us to think about, well, what if neither of us are alive? How is this decision going to affect us?
Yeah.
But for me, it's important to think that through. The other group of people are the ones who just go and veg, and these are people that have had really senior jobs, partners in huge law firms and stuff, and they've just vegged. They've got into the sitting on the sofa and watching daytime telly, and it's generally, and again, it's often men, and their wives contact me and say, like, can you sort him out? Because like if he carries on like this, I'm off. And that's quite hard because they can't actually see it. And it's a really difficult thing to be brought in when the people don't want it. But so then it's about, well, what is it that would interest me? What is it? Because a lot of my clients, because obviously I work with clients of different ages, and at one stage, my biggest client group were lawyers followed by doctors who got to their late 20s and then said, why am I doing this job? It's not me, it's because my parents or my grandparents wanted me to do it. And then they either move on to something completely different, or they're already sucked into the the salary and the status.
Yeah.
So it's like, but what is it that you wanted to do? Could you do it now? And maybe they can't, but maybe there's something similar-ish to that they can do. And it's useful to start, just keeping a little notebook or something on your phone or something when you get an idea. And it's like, wow, I always wanted to be a DJ, or I always wanted to look after injured animals or something. And how can you do that? So it's worth getting those ideas out there and then seeing how could I.
I'm interested in actually rewinding a little bit, sort of that, because you said that your husband thinks that you're a bit pessimistic. I actually find it quite liberating when you sort of said, what will happen if I'm not healthy, or what will happen if my partner's not healthy, or or sort of what happens if one person dies, and there's there's that you have a life together with somebody, don't you, or with a family, but that may or may not be together, that may or may not be forever. So I actually think it's quite liberating, sort of to plan for worst case scenarios, and I think it's liberating because you think I've got to make the most of now. Yeah, because I don't know, there's that kind of thinking of planning ahead, I'll do this when I'm 60, I'll do it when I'm 70, I'll do it when I'm 80, I'll do it when I'm 90. Well, that's fine, but you might not get there, or your family might not get there, or the world around you might change, or COVID might happen, sort of said, I'm going to do that. Imagine somebody was planning their retirement and a trip around the world in 2019, and then they couldn't. And then, by the time the sort of the 2022 came around, let's say, I don't know, the health wasn't up to it anymore. So I think it's quite liberating to plan for worst possible scenarios.
Yeah. Well, I think so, but we have very different backgrounds. So I'm used to working in strategy, when you do think, worst case scenario and what might be. But personally, I'm seriously back into adventures now. That my partner is completely not interested in. But it's like, but I need to have them, because in 2 years' time, I might not be physical. They're quite physical challenges. I might not be able to do it. So I know you're saying we should save money, but for me, I'm saving experiences. And I think that's something that I was talking to a client the other day, and she was saying, I don't have stories for when I'm old. And we talked about that, and she knew that I'd just come back from living with a Maasai tribe, which is quite a radical trip to do. And she says, like, but I don't have stories like that. And her husband died 2 years ago, and she said, I need to get them. So I've given her some websites where she can go explore about going traveling. But it's a major thing. But she's talking about having stories around travel, but it doesn't have to be that. So next time I see her, it could be with the stories could be about the way you got involved with a charity, the way you set up charity, the way you got involved with your local community. So I think there's lots of things that we can do. When she said she hadn't got any stories, and I thought, that's when we've got the great grandchildren around us, and we're 104. They're like, great grandma, tell me about the time you.
Yeah.
And I think it's nice to have those stories to share.
I hope you're enjoying the show. Please click subscribe so you'll be notified when new episodes become available. This podcast is part of my mission to help doctors create successful and meaningful careers. You can be part of that mission too by forwarding this show to one person who you think might benefit from listening. Thank you. Now on with the show. So the key that I think I'm hearing is the idea of consciously planning it, although, sort of not, I don't mean planning every minute by detail, but consciously thinking about it, what is it that retirement involves, what do you want to do? And of course it's going to be different for everybody, but the key thing from what you're saying is you need to think about it, and you need to do some sort of planning for what that transition looks like, and what life after is going to be like. Because otherwise, one day you're here, you've planned nothing, the next day you've something else, and and you've not thought it through, you've not planned or considered what you want.
Yeah. And we're living longer, although not necessarily in good health, but we're living longer. So I remember as a 20-year-old, the people would retire at 60 from the large organisation I worked for. And pretty much then they were old. you know, they might take up golf, but they felt old. Society told them they were old, and they began to sort of, you know, their life, for many, not obviously not all, would sort of whatever you call it, you know, just implode, come inwards, and there'd be less things to do. Now we've got people thinking about, well, you know, the 100-year life. We could still be alive at 100, yeah, but you might not be in good health. So we've got to think of that. And there's also, I'm well aware of this. It's all very nice for me being at home and my computer, working in a nice environment rather than, you know, I'm working in a factory on my feet all day and in not particularly nice environment and having to do shifts. So we you know, we need to think not everybody's going to have the luxury of doing things, and not everybody has a pension. But it was but I think retirement is changing, and I think that's a really good thing. That we can now role model what it's like for the 20 and 30-year-olds coming up behind us, so they can say it's not their grandparents' retirement, it's going to be something different. And probably people will be working till well into their 70s, you know, in another generation. Yeah.
And if somebody does choose to work, you know, beyond 65, 67, 70, whatever it'll be, I mean, what are your tips of trying to marry up somebody's ongoing work with doing other things? You know, how does one get that balance right?
So one of the things you can do is to think about what are the things, go way, way back to childhood. So what are the things that I loved to do when I was at primary school? You know, it might have been colouring in, it might have been, you know,
Mm.
playing cowboys and Indians, I don't know. But it's like, if you start thinking about the things that you really enjoy doing as a child, there's often something within that that can spur you into doing something else. I was always making hospitals with my Lego and my farm animals, and you know, or schools or something. And if I think about that, that's because I liked organisation, which I do a lot of organisation for people now. But I was always really, really, really into music because my dad was. And now my whole social life, a big chunk of it is going to gigs. And it's so that's, and I was thinking today as I was walking back from the swimming pool about, yeah, if I was looking for a job, I could work for a promoter, and I could be selling the merchandise or something. So it's nothing that's gonna, you know, earn me a lot of money, probably get me into gigs for free and hang out with the musicians. But you know what? If I had loads of spare time, that might be something that I'd enjoy doing, because it's often less about being driven by the money, but what's going to make us be fulfilled. And I think that's what we should be thinking about. What is it that's given us meaning? Because, you know, in the medical profession, of course, your job's meaningful.
Yeah.
But it's how do you actually see it if you're, you know, tied into this sort of environment. And sometimes people do get burnt out and they just want to do something that's more easier, more satisfying for them.
Yeah. It's interesting that if I kind of think of healthcare, you know, we do something that's very meaningful, and you know, and majority of us are there because we want to make the world a better place. We want to make a difference to the people around us. I'm interested in how whether you take that with you sort of as you retire. In other words, you know, I've spent the last 40 years helping people clinically. I'm now going to do something else. I'm going to help people, but in a different way, because you know, because
Yeah.
that might be one way to take the same interest forwards. Or you might sort of say, okay, I've spent the last 40 years looking out for everybody else and helping them, and you know, and that's been very enjoyable and very rewarding. But one might sort of think, actually, I'm going to do something completely different. I mean, from your experience, I mean, do people tend to sort of have a value that they carry with them, or do people sort of say, that's it, I'm going to do something totally different, or a mixture of the two?
It can be either, because sometimes people are burned out and they want to do something different. And sometimes people just want to use that knowledge and the ability, their personality, their values, and use it in a different setting. One of the things I'd like to share is that, you know, often people think, I've got to make a decision. You know, it's like, because, you know, I'm a high flying, you know, and I've got to make a decision. It's got to be the right one. No, it doesn't. And I think, you know how people often, take the holiday and or take retirement and they go and they decorate the house and sort the garden out and go on a big holiday and stuff. And I think it's worth taking time just to see what percolates. Just notice some things and come up with some ideas about what is it that you want to do. But if you and it might be, and I've got a friend who, when she retired as a nurse, she was going out to Africa with VSO, and she did that for 5 or 10 years. So well into her 70s, she was still going out doing that, which she found very fulfilling. And then she moved on to doing St. John's Ambulance. So she carried on doing that because that remained her identity. And now she's volunteering at the theatre and she's in her 80s now. So she's always wanted to be of help. But I think going back to what I said before, it's just think of some ideas and try them out. It's a bit like going into a new clothes shop. Just try some things on and see what you think about them. Because you don't want to think that's not going to work. Because it might do. But maybe also you want a combination of things. So, you want possibly a day where you carry on doing some consultancy that's well paid, but then the rest of your week is things related to your hobbies or voluntary work.
Yeah. So it's that idea that, yes, you might carry on doing that kind of, helping stuff, and that's fine. Perhaps if you've thought about it and made a conscious decision. I guess the difficulty is where people haven't made the decision. People just carry on, don't they? We kind of what we talked about earlier, that people just do more of the same stuff without really pausing or stopping and thinking and saying, okay, is this still the right thing for me? And of course, it may be the right thing, but it may not be,
Yeah. And particularly if they just carry on working because they're going to start doing the big holidays when they get older. And then they start having, as knee problems or heart problems or something. And they can't do these things. And that's what I hear so much. It's like, I should have done it when I was younger. And I don't sit there and say, yeah, you're right, because I don't think that's a helpful comment.
Yeah.
to say back to them. These are people I meet, at the gym and music festivals and things. But it would be like, okay, but what would you like to do now? From where you are now. And maybe, they're doing their travels on a coach trip where they really wanted to go backpacking, but they can still travel.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. So I think that kind of strikes me as important that do it when you can. And it's I suppose that there's a balance. It's good to plan for the future, as we talked about. It's good to consider sort of what might happen and what might go wrong in the future. But the challenge is when people are constantly putting everything into the future. I'll do it in 10 years time, I'll do it when I retire, I'll do it sort of next year, and maybe saving up, planning, preparing, all of that's very exciting. But if the entire life is built around, I'm going to do this at some stage in the future, and you never ever do anything now, then that's also problematic.
There's some research that backs that up. I haven't got that in my head anymore. But it's the people that are future thinking, or the people that put things off to the future. So let's say somebody's 50 and thinking, I'll put it off I'll put it off for 10 years. But in 10 years, they're also saying, I'll put it off for 10 years because they're always trying to put things off. And that was really interesting reading around that one, because it's like, well, how can you help people to make some decisions now? Because if they're the sort of people that are always going to put things off, I can't change people. I mean, people have got to want to change themselves, and they're often the ones who don't have any, they don't have a huge amount of pension savings because they're going to start saving, and in a few years into the future, and suddenly they're 60 and they've got 70,000 in their savings account, which it's not going to go very far.
Okay. I wonder if I could bring us to a close, Denise, and perhaps if I could ask you to summarize, what would be your top tips when it comes to retirement?
Yeah, I think whatever age you are now, it's thinking about what would you like your future to be? And I think it's really good to do the scenario. So let's imagine that you're going to retire as soon as you get your occupational pension? What is it that you would like to do? And take some time, and maybe you're artistic and you want to draw. So think about that, but also think about what are some of the things that you could do, and start just collecting things. You know, as you read, if you read through the Sunday Times, you know, all the supplements and stuff, start ripping pictures out, and you start thinking, it's all about, you know, tropical islands, but I don't want to just go there and laze on a beach. And maybe you want to do something with a charity where you're going, Earth, can't remember. Anyway, there's a charity that you can go and like count manatee and stuff. So it might be it's something like that that you want to do. So explore, because you know this future is a really precious time, and I just want to really encourage people to make the best of it, because I don't want to be hearing about people in their late 80s who are saying, yeah, there was that podcast I listened to 25 years ago. Yeah, she had a point, and it's all a bit late now.
Yeah.
So it's like, start thinking about what is it that you want to do. And a final thing that I talk about in my book is about, imagine you're 90 and you're looking back on your life, and what would the 90-year-old say to you now? And it was like, you needed to have more adventures, maybe. Or, yeah, you should have, I don't know, you should have left your partner and gone off with that school love that suddenly reappeared 50 years later. I don't know, but you know, but it's really useful to start thinking about 90 and looking back on your life and what message you'd say to yourself. So that's a good activity to do.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Denise.
My pleasure. Nice to see you again, Matt.